could have heard there was
I just
balloons floating by someplace. We'll see what was happening.
well, the sheet that feeds the sheet. So, adjusted that in there. Except
Well, that's
for many. Hey, Glenwood.
I'm sorry.
Ben won't be here today.
He won't.
No.
Right.
He had a business meeting up in Prince Edward Island. And he couldn't get back.
He might not get back at all.
Right.
The April 10th, 2025 Auburn City Council workshop will be called to order. We have a single item of business tonight, it's the FY26 budget. The manager will give us an overview. The staff has been diligently working for the last 10 days or so based on the recommendations and departmental feedback from the prior workshops. And so I'll turn it over to the manager to brief you on the updated budget sheet.
Great, thanks, Mayor. So as the mayor stated, based on the last few workshops, what we've been able to do is take where we felt the council was leaning in different areas, where there were some off limits based on some conversations as well, and rework this budget. So the sheets that you have, a couple things with this. Don't replace this with your sheet that I provided you on Monday, because that's actually the city manager's proposed budget, right? So after we do these next series of workshops, we'll continue making adjustments to the council proposals based on where we go with conversations. Outcome tonight is to walk through the changes in the summary sheet. I'll talk about that in a minute. Then I'll also talk about the adjustments that were made through each line item that has a variation from the previous workshop, and then also any revenue adjustments, and an overview of the changes that we made to the supplemental adjustments based on, again, conversations. Tonight, I think that what I would be looking for is this in the direction you want to head? And then if you have other suggestions, then share those, and then we'll go back and we'll start reworking the other adjustments that you might come up with. So again, not looking for a long meeting tonight, more of a check-in, take a look at these items. Do we have consensus on where we're headed? And like I had stated before, if there's no consensus, it doesn't remove you as an individual counselor to still bring that up under first reading, right? You can always make an amendment. You can always see if there's support within the board at that first reading. What will take place, though, is if we're getting consensus on most of these items, then when we present the council-approved budget, it'll have these items that we've kind of come to an agreement on, and then you can make your adjustments from there. Okay? So the first sheet that you have is the new summary sheet. When we talked about this a couple meetings ago, we talked about providing you with a breakout of the referendum debt for both city and school, and then the debt breakout for both municipal and city, so that you could see the debt requirement. So if you take a look at I'm looking at this sheet here. So if you take a look at this, the municipal expenses now has a line that includes the operating expenses for the city. That's all of our departments. and then you have intergovernmental, and you have county tax. That will get you your total municipal expenses. So based on the adjustments that I'm gonna go over tonight, currently, the way that the proposals, based on what you have been looking for, the operating expenses for municipal is sitting at 3.08%, or 1.3 million. So everybody see that line item where I'm at? Included in that line item, if you recall, at the last meeting, we talked about bringing in recreation programming into the actual budget. So that's showing those new expenses of over $300,000 into that line item. Now, we'll get down further, you're gonna see an increase in revenue because we did the offset in the revenue. But I just want you to know that that percentage change, the reason why it changes, we've made a lot of other adjustments, but also that we're brought in $300 and almost $50,000 of new expenses that will be offset with the revenues. Now you see intergovernmental is sitting at 6.4%, county tax at 8.6%. So a total municipal expense at 3.5. And then the school operating expenses is sitting at 4.9%. And the debt service, as you see the breakout of the debt service, the debt service includes the municipal bond, all of our bonds that are for municipal, all the CIP bonds that you approve. The school bond for not just this is not including the high school. This is just school bonds, what they have outstanding on school bonds. And then you have the municipal public referendum. That's for the public safety building. You're seeing the first impact for FY26 for public safety. And then the school public referendum, and that's for the new high school. So that puts our total debt expense at $23 million. That's a 9.9% increase. If you go up to where the municipal, you'll see that there's a 20% increase on just the municipal bond. That's the adding of Merrill Road that we did last budget year. There was a few other line items that were included in that increased that total bond for CIP 25. The less non-tax revenues, these are the revenues that we bring in through tax sharing, permits, fees, licenses, all those line items. That's now showing the municipal and the school with the total non-tax revenue. And then to get to the tax levy, those same categories, we now take those amounts, we reduce any revenue that offsets it, and that provides you with the tax levy for municipal, which is currently at 1.8%, 88%. School is at 6.64%. Intergovernmental is at 7.67%. Debt municipal and school is at 8.26. Debt public referendums at 41.78. And then the overlay, that's adjusted based on once the assessor sets the new valuation. That's when we determine what the overlay will be. So that puts your total tax levy, and I'm going to go over all those reductions and changes in a minute, but now puts it at 5.53%. So if you look at your budget book from Monday, I believe that number was sitting at 8.4? Okay, 8.44% is where it was at. So this is what we've done so far. Now, if you turn to that next page that I provided you, I'm not going to go through all of this. Well, I'm just going to give you the highlights. What I provided, though,
Yeah,
Mayor, go
before
ahead.
you move on to that, just so everyone's clear, especially the folks from the public, since we're breaking this out now, in the debt service on the school public referendum line, that is the additions that was in the referendum for the high school that the public approved.
That's correct.
And up above, under the school line, the 10 million plus, that is Park Ave, the high school, but not the high school portion that's paid for by the state school construction.
Correct, it's local share only.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Historically, school will put in about $1 million in debt for school repairs. The last few years, because of the new high school, they hadn't taken on any additional debt. So that's why you're seeing a reduction within that line item, because there was no new debt in the last, so they're paying that debt down. So that's what that difference is.
I just wanted to make sure that as you go on and explain further with regard to debt service, so I do see the breakout of, I'm comparing your budget to this budget just to understand how the line items are going to change, and you're going to explain that. I see the school debt service as flat. I see the municipal debt service as $4 million less on this piece of paper. So is that part of the explanation that we're going to receive?
The only change that took place with the debt numbers is a reduction of 160,000 on municipal. That, if you look at the totals, that should be the only change.
I guess I'm comparing it to, again, last week's document says municipal debt service and TIF. Could that be the reason that number is so much higher?
And TIF.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah, it's about 3.2 million in TIF funds offset. We took that out, so now you're looking at a true debt number. For whatever reason, for years, TIF was always rolled into the debt service line. I'm not sure why. It's rolled into now the municipal operating.
Awesome. That was the piece I was looking for. Thank you.
Yeah, because it looks like it's about 13 million is the debt service without the TIF, right? 11.7 plus $1 million plus 460, 13.1.
Including the two.
Yeah.
Yep, so starting.
Including
from
the
that,
two referendums.
13.1, and the TIF is above that.
Correct. So if you're taking out the TIF, then you're just taking that debt service total, that's what those
Do you
breakouts
have
equal
that
to.
number, that TIF number?
It's 3
That's
million.
3.2 million.
Yeah.
3.2?
Yep.
If these are the number, when I go through all these numbers, and again, like I said, we'll do the highlights tonight, and then you say, yeah, we want to continue with that. Next week, we'll give you a master list breakdown, and you'll start seeing all those adjustments in the master list. Everybody good? All right. And again, I won't go through, this will be a good document for you to reference back to, because it really does provide you all the impacts from each department, what those changes are looking like. So you'll have a chance to kind of review and go through all of those. I'll give you some highlights of those. The first department that has an adjustment is in finance. Just get back to the right page. One thing about the finance budget, so you'll see what we'll wrap up in that form that you'll get next week is you're going to see 112,000 reduction in the operating services for finance, but there's also 150,000 now included in there for the tax senior tax program. So adjusted 25,000 out of that. It was at 175, so now we have it at 150. So that'll be the line item changes that you see in there. And again, you'll see that in your master list adjustments, you're just going to see the non-supplemental changes. It's just the department changes. Your supplemental are items that we're still talking about. So if you right now, though, when you look at that summary sheet that we just went over, and we're seeing the total municipal operating services in this sheet, that now includes 150,000 for the senior tax rebate program. And for finance, it's an additional 112,000 reduction. What we're doing with that 112 is we're making adjustments with another funding source to provide and change what was a position into a contract position. So it shifts that, and we're paying for it out of a contract. Councilman Mills?
Is that supplemental budget, is that part of your budget? Are those items
It's
included?
not part of the
in-
manager's budget that you
So
got.
the manager's budget that was submitted, that's not part of that? So
not
if it
part of
doesn't
that.
get, it reverts back to yours, that's not part?
It's not part of it.
Okay, thank you.
It's in these, if you look at that header on the top, it says council proposal. Council proposed budget, it's in those, that total right there, but not in the managers.
Not in your budget.
Right, yep. All right, so that's finance. Next, communications and community engagement. This reduces about a 38,000 total shift in this budget. That is a change in reducing events and reducing advertisements. Basically taking Blues and Brews, moving that to the Balloon Festival weekend. That reduces some of our costs and also eliminates the Lobster Fest, not for this year. We're talking about the next budget year. So it eliminates the Lobster Fest and it reduces some funding as it pertains to marketing and advertisement. We have less programs to market, less to advertise. It also reduces $20,000 on the revenue side because we have less sponsorships that we can collect money for. So we had 40,000 in there for sponsorships, we now reduce it down to 20,000. Okay. Business and community development. You have a few things going on within this change. One, it does eliminate about $110,000 in what I would call the local tax obligation for business and community development. If you recall, business and community development has a lot of federal programming as well. So to get to that adjustment, it's changing certain positions, maybe paying for them, some out of the federal column and some being eliminated out of the local column. So, but ultimately it eliminates 3 vacant positions that's currently within that office. So 3 vacant positions are gone, reduces the local tax 110,000, adjusts some of the federal funding that might be now obligated for additional programming, and then within that line item, you will also see that $250,000 is now added for homeless services. So that's 25,000 off of where we were 2 workshops ago was around 175,000. That's now down to 250. So that's what's being held there now for consideration. Public services reduces 35,000. We had allocated with the elimination of the deputy director for public services. We had kept about 30,000 in for contracted services. We're now removing that 30,000. If there's any new additional contract services, we'll work those into the cost of whatever project that we're doing. And then we also eliminated about $5,000 for services or supplies that we were providing. We've been holding manufacturing monthly meetings, and there has been about a $5,000 cost for breakfast and supplies for those meetings. We've stopped that. We'll encourage maybe one of the manufacturers to host that and cover the cost for it. So that's what we'll look for. Look for a sponsorship. Planning and permitting. This adds the 105,000 that we had discussed regarding the additional code enforcement officer. There's a $105,000 revenue offset for that line item. Recreation. Recreation's showing under this. And remember, when we talk about the programming, there might be people wrapped up into that programming. So when I talk about the programming, we're eliminating some programs within rec. These are programs that may have had poor participation. And as a result of that, the registration fees had not been offsetting the cost to provide that program. Another thing that we had not done in the past is that none of the registration fees were built in to offset the recreation costs for staff and facility and all of those costs. To start getting in that direction, this budget now includes covering the cost for 20% of the recreation budget. To get to that, some programs were increased by 35% to offset some of the admin fees. And some of the programs, summer rec was increased by 25%. We're still way below market on a lot of our program costs, but that's helping by bringing in an additional $95,000 in revenue to help offset those, the recreation budget itself. $95,000 in revenue is a 20% offset for the cost for recreational programming. The other piece is, if you remember, several councils ago, we had talked about providing youth sports at no cost. But there was you had to meet a salary requirement. There was, that hadn't been, we hadn't had a lot of people be able to meet that salary requirement because we also provide scholarships. And so we'll continue providing the scholarships. One thing that we've done is when we've changed all the rec programming into the budget and the new revenue that comes in, there is in the rec, the special revenue account for recreation programming, there's some additional funds there. We'll retain some of those funds to help offset scholarships in the future. And then it'll just keep taking from that when scholarships, as long as somebody's meeting the income requirements. So a lot of changes within rec. Programming definitely adjusted. Some of the office staff adjusted for coverage for the front desk. We're going to encourage more online registration enrollments. Those things probably have limited hours of when somebody will be available. So they can register online or come when the hours are available for the front desk. And then reduction in programmings that were not really sustaining the program itself and the cost for the program.
And you said that there was fees for participation were increased 25 and 35%? Is that what those 25 and 35% was? So
all programs are increasing, I'm sorry, not all. Some of them were definitely probably already above market. Those programs we did not adjust. Programs that were below, we did adjust up 35%.
and then for those programs, there's a scholarship for kids that
That's correct.
can't, okay, good.
So basically, so if you, I think a good example is if it's a youth basketball program, it's probably going to be less than $15 more for that program. That's where the adjustment's coming in.
I would just like to make a comment. I think as far as making cuts to those services in rec, understanding what we're up against, I do support that reduction in services. I would say I would love for the city to be cognizant of access to some activity. If there are students or children that don't have access, even if we run out of scholarship funds, I would love for the council to know about that. I think there's ways to tap into the private sector for something like this as well. Again, it's hard to see a program go away, but I think it's unconscionable to not allow a kid to participate if we have the ability to do that. And I'm sure we have lots of ways to do that.
Yeah, we certainly are not turning away anyone, and so there's opportunities. I think we've created a bit of an account to be able to continue with that. The other piece that I failed to mention was regarding some of the senior programming. The adjustment under the senior program is those are really the cost for those. It's not like you're registering for a 11-week program. You might be signing up for a trip. So those trips will now cover, the cost for those trips will now cover the true cost for that trip. And so they might say, we're basing this budget on the costs, and we need 10 people to participate to make sure we're covering those costs. If only 5 people sign up, then they're not taking that trip. We need to make sure we're covering the costs. That's everything from fuel, mileage, and the programmer's cost to actually go on that trip as well. So we're covering those costs within that. Okay? The public library, I requested the library to reduce their budget by $50,000. They did provide me a pretty detailed list that's in your summary of adjustments and details for impacts on that, but it's basically adjusting personnel, library service costs, in library hours. They're taking Saturday, and instead of being open till 5, they're staying consistent and being open at 1 o'clock on Saturdays, 9 to 1, and then they're reducing some of their other part-time hours for those adjustments. But there's more detail in your sheet that you can take a look at, Mayor. I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
so to follow up on the library issue, this is another area where there's a lot of subsidization of services going on, so I requested some numbers on card holders from the director, and as an example, you know, Minnet, we have an agreement with Minnet because Minnet doesn't have a library. So Minnet has 8.1% of the card holders, users that can take things from the library. They pay 1.9% of the outside revenue. We have a smaller group, but a group of other Androscoggin County towns, meaning not Minot, not Lewiston, right? Because Lewiston and Auburn have a reciprocal agreement. And then there's people outside Androscoggin County, and on a per-card basis, if you take the outside revenue, they pay $60 now for Auburn residents. If you look at this internally, it's over $200 per card holder. So this is certainly, I know Councilor Whiting sits on the board, this is certainly sort of similar to the school department. It's not our job to decide how they would deal with this, but there's been very little movement on this, so I think when we adopt the budget, I'll bring forth an order that makes the appropriation to the library contingent on the board reviewing and making adjustments in the budget relative to revenue by September 30th. And why that is necessary is some of the partners have an annual meeting, so their budget starts January 1. So they're going to need to know from the board, you know, if we wait till next year when our budget comes around, they'll be stuck, right? So I think that will help with some of this. It'll raise some additional revenues, and it'll be a little more equitable and be less subsidization of users that are outside of Lewiston, Auburn.
The next item is fringe benefits. You won't see that in the adjustments. What I did was I included all the fringe benefits in those department totals. So when you see the department total and there's personnel tied to that, then those fringe benefits are just built into that total. So fringe benefits will adjust based on the positions that are impacted by program reduction. Fire and EMS transport, the third ambulance, that was a pilot project in FY24. We had originally allocated $40,000 for the pilot project. And then there was $135,000 that was added in as one of the supplemental items. And then there was a revenue offset to that of $75,000. So what this budget that I'm proposing here with the changes eliminates the $40,000 that was in the existing manager's budget because it carried over all programs from the previous year. So that was that $40,000. Also recommending to eliminate the $135,500 that was for the third ambulance to carry on for the full year, as well as the offset of the $75,000 in revenue. So it eliminates the third ambulance from what we're proposing. We'll continue with what we have right now for services. We'll continue doing our best with EMS. That's not an adjustment with any staff. EMS, that pilot project with EMS was basically saying, Adam works for the fire department, he's on EMS. This is a point of time in the day where we know we needed some added services because of what we know for call volume. Call Adam in, Adam would work overtime for that shift. So it's not adjusting personnel at all. It's just reducing the overtime costs, okay? And then the other piece within the fire reduction here. And this is one that we'll probably need to have some discussions at the next workshop on this, because this is a change of service. And so we talked a lot about minimum staffing. If we get below 14, that's when we start replacing. The recommendation that I'm making is that when it's a weekend and we drop below 14, we take an apparatus out of service. So the personnel that were left on that apparatus, if that truck is out of service, will roll into one of the other trucks and at one of the other stations. And that apparatus just goes out of service for that weekend hours. If we took a look at, the chief went back and looked at every time that occurred last year, and that totaled $90,000. I'm only recommending $50,000 in here, because there's gonna be some weekends where it's a balloon festival weekend, there's no way the chief should make that decision. Or there's a storm event, or whatever it might be, we need to keep that truck in service. But if there's nothing pending in the community, no major events, no concerns about weather impacts, then the chief will work with the battalion chiefs to know when to make that decision and take that apparatus out of service.
Are we making is that decision being made for Saturday because that's the day that staffing and labor dictates that, or is Saturday a less busy day for calls than the rest of the week?
A combination of both. Yep. The types of calls change a bit on weekends too. So we have less motor vehicle accidents on those weekend hours as well.
So let's say there's a fire, and that apparatus is out of service. How long would it take to get the staff in place to get that apparatus back into service?
It's basically the same time frame when there's a multiple alarm and they start making phone calls for people to come back in. It really does vary. But it does not delay the request for mutual aid. That the timing of that mutual aid will continue happening. Lewiston will be, because we call for Lewiston. So before when we do a multiple alarm, we're calling some of our people that are off duty back in. Long before they get here, we already have mutual aid either backfilling the station for any new calls that come in. Typically that's Poland often. Or Lewiston rather is responding, as well as maybe Minot or another community is responding to that
So is it
fire.
fair to say that this is gonna help reduce the budget some, but it's not gonna have a tremendous increase in risk to the community?
Well, I mean, it's
There's
always.
some, like.
If there's a huge fire every weekend, we'll end up paying more for all these other towns to come in because we have an apparatus that's delayed, right?
No, we all provide mutual aid coverage, so it's not, we're not getting that extra cost. However, everything that we're proposing has a risk to it. Every one of them, right? So is there a risk? Absolutely. Are we trying to reduce that risk, mediate it the best we can? Yes. Is this could there be a potential impact on this? Absolutely.
So just to clarify this, a few months back, Chief Chase gave us a briefing, and he's here. He can straighten me out here if I get too far afield. But my recollection was that there was a certain number of apparatus required for certain types of fire events, and that even a residential house fire, mutual aid would be involved already anyway,
Absolutely.
right?
Yeah.
So if we're getting in effect on a weekend, if we drop one apparatus, for those types of events, we'd still have to have mutual aid. We would just be leaning a little more heavily on mutual aid to get the number of apparatus that's necessary for a house fire or a commercial building. Is that right?
Yeah, I think that's exactly right, and again, we can have the chief clarify things later. But yes, and then also, but what it also does is sometimes we have some non-emergency calls as well. It means that we're delaying the response on those types of calls. So there's trade-offs here, and this is part of it. Okay?
Would this jeopardize our certification or insurance standing? I know we've talked about insurance is going up when you decrease your ability to respond. Is
I
that
think-
factored into the
I
budget?
think in a follow-up, when we do talk with the chief, we can talk about how does it might impact the ISO rating and what that looks like for us.
Just to make sure I'm understanding the amount, for the change two that you're talking about right now, that's approximately $50,000 you're proposing to remove, to make those changes. The additional $40,000 for the total of 90 was taking out the pilot dollars that was in your budget.
Yeah, so you're gonna see a $90,000 reduction from the manager's recommendation. The rest were in the supplemental. So 40 and 50. Yep. Okay. So under police, there are a few moving pieces here for police. We currently have, we currently have a ACO that's being, the animal control officer duties is being provided by a sworn officer. That, those duties will, what we're gonna propose is that shifts to a civilian position. When we shift that to a civilian position, that officer will backfill another vacancy that we have. But that position will now move to being frozen. We'll freeze that. It's still unauthorized, but we'll freeze it for this year. And then we also have a parking enforcement officer. And that position that we're freezing is the position that we just reinstated January 1st, based on the FY '24 budget, that we've still yet to fill. So it's still vacant. And so, yeah,
Because that, in the priority of the positions, that's at the lowest level, and there's 2, 3, 5 positions open all the time.
Right.
You never have been able to get enough positions filled to get to that one.
that's correct. Even when we are filled, they're usually at the academy and they're still not in the places that they need to be in. And by the time they do get cleared, there's other vacancies that they're filling, so. Okay. And then the parking enforcement officer is in the operating budget. What we're proposing is we take it out of operating and we put that in the special revenue account for parking permits. So we have over 400 people that pay for a permit within the city. Those permit fees offset all the maintenance costs for the parking garage. And so what we'll be proposing as a recommendation moving forward in the future will be to take the permit fee, which is currently at $45 a month, increase that $55 a month. That increases our revenue about $50,000. Plus, the parking enforcement officers on track to probably also be able to adjust our fines by about $15,000 on top of what was already proposed. So, so that's the adjustments within PD. Public Works, a few changes within Public Works. Some of this has to do with, that will impact the maintenance services. You had 3 positions with equipment operators that we just started within the budget in March. If you remember, those individuals are going to be doing some of the striping. What we're recommending is only do 2. We have yet to fill those positions yet, and so only fund 2 of those positions. That reducing that 1 vacant position will certainly have an impact on our beautification efforts, on the sidewalk clearing during storms. Striping, will be pulling somebody. We still need 3 for the striping, so that means we're pulling somebody that would normally be doing ditching, culvert repair, all of those other duties, maybe assisting in the arborist. So it does extend some of the work orders as the work goes out. It might be adjusting those. It might take a little longer to get to whatever the need is, whether it's replacing signs or whatever that might be. So that has a combination of impacts. The other one is customer service, having somebody available, processing the work orders. We're gonna adjust some of that, so that's kind of an impact on customer service and availability of somebody to answer the phone. Doesn't mean we're not taking the information, just won't be somebody there to answer all the time. And then the third adjustment, we were able to sign the contract for the diesel fuel. And so diesel fuel price came in lower than we thought, so we're adjusting the budget based on that reduction. Solid waste. This adds funding to the manager's recommendation for the organic waste sites and the campsites. Under your supplemental, what it removes bulky waste. It suspends the bulky waste program for now. And it also removes the $183,000 that was budgeted for the new bins. Dennis has talked with Maine Waste to Energy, I'm sorry, not Maine, Casella rather, and has discussed about when would that be coming online. We can extend that an additional year. What that does mean, though, is that means rather than financing that over 5 years, we'll finance it over 4, picking it up in that next year. Okay? Debt service. The adjustment with the debt service is that the Hilton Garden Inn sold, and when the Hilton Garden Inn sold, they had a loan with us for their River Watch program for many years. When that sold, that debt was paid off. So we were able to reduce the debt service by $160,000. So that's the adjustment within debt service. The LA Transit, we were able to reduce that by $26,000. This is part of your intergovernmental. LA Transit, Councilor Cowan and I were at a board meeting today. The state was able to come forward with a contract, an amount for transit services for the community. Based on that, both communities were able to reduce our operating budget by $26,000. So Lewiston will reduce by 26, Auburn's gonna reduce by 26.
So, to make sure I'm clear on this, on the line by line, it shows it's a -20, and this shows, the detailed sheet shows 26.
Yeah, the sheet that you have here, that just happened at 1 o'clock today, so this just probably doesn't show the 26, but
So
it's 20.
this one shows 20, minus 20,000.
Yeah, it'll be minus 26.
It'll be minus 20.
Yeah, that's in your new summary sheet here.
Yeah, the 26 is in the summary sheet,
Yeah,
and this just needs
I
to be.
think you're the only
adjusted.
one with that, Mayor.
Okay.
All right. LA 911, I spoke to the city administrator, acting city administrator in Lewiston, talked about 911 reductions, also spoke with the 911 director. There was there were 2 positions that were frozen last year's budget. In January, those were reinstated. Those are still vacant positions. They haven't been able to fill those positions. What I'm proposing is we keep one of them frozen into this next budget. So that reduces $50,000 for both Auburn and Lewiston for the position plus all fringe. So that's a $50,000 reduction in LA 911. Arts and culture, I know we went back and forth and with some recommendations on what should we do. Historical Society, I think Councilor Platts talked about that as well. I think that I'm just going based off from some commitments that we had discussed when Historical Society had put in funding under ARPA. We moved them away from the ARPA and said we'll work in some funding under the operating budget. So what I'm recommending is we just fund the arts and culture at $10,000, $5,000 for historical and $5,000 for LA Arts. And, if the council wants to make adjustments within that, we can do that at another workshop, but just something for you to consider. Now moving into your supplementals, I covered most of these. Campsite cleanup is one that I think I mentioned. We had originally said for that was 20, I'm sorry, I think we reduced that from what we originally asked was 25, we reduced it to 15, so we cut 10,000 off that.
35 to 25.
35 to 25, thank you. The third ambulance covered, talked about the homeless senior tax. Boys and Girls Club and the Twin City swim team, you've already discussed that and recommended not funding those, so I took those out. And then I talked about all the other items. The one that I did not include was the fire chief has been discussing with us regarding, one thing that a lot of communities are doing is they're charging insurance companies for when the fire department rolls out on, are you missing something?
Yeah, Kelsey,
You should not have had that. That one there is outdated. That's why that was off.
okay, thank you.
So my apologies. Must have got slipped in there.
So we don't have one.
You don't have that sheet. That sheet's not the right sheet,
So
so.
I'm looking at the supplemental requests that were sent, that we went over in the last meeting.
The last
Yeah.
meeting, yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
One update on 4th?
That's correct.
Yeah. So, one thing that we added within I covered all the supplemental items, Councilor Milks, when I went through all those other budget items. And then, one thing that we've added within revenue is, $30,000 for EMS crash calls. So if the fire department's rolling out for a crash, there's no transport within that, but there's still services that are being administered on scene, but no transport, then we will contract with a third party to go ahead and bill that insurance company for the EMS service on scene at that crash. And this is something that we are seeing other communities participate in. Mayor?
Yeah, and my recollection of prior conversations, that's a conservative estimate because we're going into this in the first year. We potentially would estimate greater revenue than that, but we don't want to book that revenue because we haven't done this before. Is
That's
that
correct.
fair to
Yeah.
say?
Yeah, we're not sure what the results will be on the collection, so. So those are the adjustments. As I said, where you're sitting right now. Sorry, also in here is 500,000 that you had suggested for school reduction. And so you're currently sitting at 5.5%.
And what isn't in here is any potential increase to Maine Waste to Energy, which is where Council Walker is chairing the board meeting tonight as they're doing their budget. But I just have a placeholder in my notes because I'm assuming we are going to see some type of tipping fee increase. We just don't know what that is yet, and we won't know till tomorrow.
That's correct. Currently, we're paying $47 a ton for tipping. That increase is gonna be anywhere, we'll see what they do. But it could be as high as $62 or as low as $48. It needs to be higher. We need to make sure we're covering the operating costs for the Maine Waste to Energy, so we'll see where we land on that. So those are the changes. Yep, there.
Yeah, questions, thoughts? Council Whiting?
Yeah, I'd just like to compliment city manager and staff for doing an excellent job. It's a hard job to do this kind of stuff. And, the best way is broad and lesser than looking for giant chunks that will decimate particular areas. This is very thoughtful and well done, I think.
Council Cowell?
I was going to say the same, so I really appreciate that. This is hard decisions being made, and just well done.
Council Miller?
I agree with that. I'm still trying to wrap my head around the supplemental budget. And so,
Where you sit currently in your supplemental, I'll walk through them for you.
Yeah.
One, you
So,
have the campsite cleanup.
we've got 3 pages of supplemental budget from 4-4. The first one is the admin total requested 1.6. That revenue offset of 180, but council approved 804. Then we've got all of these items on the next 2 pages.
You roughly have about 440 somewhat thousand of the supplementals that are in this council proposed budget. None of those are in the manager proposed.
Right.
Right, so
So
just,
the one I'm looking at says 804 from 4-4.
Yep. And then I've reduced that.
Right, so
And this
could you run down these items on what you reduced it to,
Yeah, happy to.
please, and thank you, that would help me. I'm looking at, it started with automatic solid waste carts, et cetera, which I remember you mentioning, we took that out, right?
We did.
Okay. Can't hold this down and write at the same time.
So that 271, we had actually brought down to 183,
Yeah,
and so now that's eliminated.
that's gone, okay,
Bulky waste disposal was at 175. I think we brought it down to 50, and now that's eliminated. Campsite cleanup was at 35. What's in now, the council proposal is 25, removing the 10.
And that campsite cleanup is where these homeless encampments
That's
have
correct.
been?
Yep.
Okay.
The code enforcement of 105,000, that's in there, and there's a $105,000 offset for revenue for that new position. EMS third ambulance, the 135.5 is removed, as well as the 75,000 that we had originally discussed for revenue offset. The homeless services, we had 400,000. We then had brought that to 275, and then what's currently in here is 250,000.
And where's that going? What is that
So
allocated toward?
Uncertain at this point.
it's not allocated to anything at this point because there's uncertainty about the implementation of the emergency shelter in Lewiston. So the original request, the councilors will recall, is the operators of the forthcoming emergency shelter requested $400,000 from Lewiston, $400,000 from Auburn, and $400,000 from the county. Of course, the request went to the county on a Wednesday morning, and they were voting second reading of their budget on Wednesday night because they were on a different fiscal year. So that's not in the county's budget this year. Lewiston is working through their budget, and my discussions with the mayor and the council president is they expect to include some amount of money. They're working through their process now for the shelter. So my view on this is that if there is an emergency shelter that stood up this year, in whole or in part, this money would go towards supporting the emergency shelter. If the emergency shelter is not stood up or the capacity isn't sufficient, some of this money or all of this money, depending on whether there's a shelter or not, would be used for emergency warming center services next winter, because you have an overlap. The group that's running the warming center in Lewiston this year is going to transition to running the shelter, so that there won't be an emergency warming center once the shelter's stood up. But it's very likely that the emergency shelter capacity will be substantially less than the number of people that they've had at the warming center this winter. So, to the manager's point, it's unallocated at this point because I don't think we have a clear picture on, I think we have a range of services that will potentially need funding. We don't know exactly what they are yet because the plans haven't been solidified for the emergency for the emergency shelter.
This eliminates that last-minute scramble that you've done for the last 2 years when a request has come in and it's now November, December, and we need to do something. This puts that money into the bank, in there, so you can say, when that request, whatever's determined, you have funding that you can at least pull from, rather than saying, well, what do we have in fund balance, or what do we have in on the other bucket? You'll have money to be able to allocate.
And I guess I would also follow up with, we've had some discussion in the past where councilors have expressed some concern about the state providing funding towards homeless services. So along those lines, they've provided $2.5 million for the emergency shelter. They've currently designated several $1 million for the Crisis Response Center, which is out to bid, which to serve the Lewiston Auburn area to follow on with the pilot project they did in Portland. And the Housing First award should be out in the next few weeks. That's you know, $1.5 million or $2 million a year to run that, plus the capital cost to build it. I'm fairly optimistic that either the Auburn or Lewiston proposals, one of the two of those, I'm optimistic will be funded. So I think, the state has responded now with several millions of dollars per year to help address the issue in Lewiston, Auburn, and it seems that there will still be some gaps, and this money will help, won't completely fill those with the Lewiston and Auburn funding, but will help to fill those gaps.
So moving down on your list, you have organic waste curbside at that 107,400, so we eliminated that. Organic waste drop site collections, mostly at schools and a few other locations, that's included in here, under your solid waste line item. And then the senior tax reimbursement program, that's funded in here at 150,000. So that's the end of that sheet.
So before we move on, I need to say it, I'll be the bad guy. I feel like the Auburn taxpayers have funded a lot of support and allocated a lot of assets to help the homeless population in the city of Auburn. And I think adding another 250,000 is a big ask for the Auburn taxpayers. So I'm not saying, but I'll be the bad guy. I think we've allocated a lot of resources in the city of Auburn to helping the homeless.
I think what will be helpful is at your next workshop on the Tuesday,
Tuesday.
The 15th. I think it'll be important for each of you to come with those line items to propose to your other counselors to say, this is what I'm recommending on this. Do we want to keep it or move it? And we'll look for consensus as we continue moving forward.
That's fair, because when I look at it, I figure from a dollar amount, that third ambulance, the third,
Sure.
that has a high impact and a low cost with the offsetting revenue. This has a high cost, and I realize that there's need there, but to me, that's where my priority.
Yeah, I think you're making valid points. Those will be the ones that you want to, each of you should be coming up with that list and say, this is what I identified. Let's see if we've got consensus. And if we do, then we'll make those adjustments in the next round.
Yeah, I think it's not just the line items. I think people need to say what the alternatives are. So if you're suggesting that you're going to cut something that's in the current level, what's your plan to address that need? Or is the plan not to address the need? Because some of these things, if the need's not addressed, other costs in the city are going to rise. So people should come with their ideas about not just if we eliminate the service, ready for a discussion about what the impact of that will be.
Great. So the next page would be the non-municipal supplemental. And so the only thing that carried forward in this budget was for Androscoggin Historical Society for $5,000. Everything else has not been carried forward in this budget. And if you remember, there was a
So
duplicate.
there's nothing for the Boys and Girls Club?
That came out as a result of the last conversation,
Yeah, no, I understand. I just
Yeah,
want
you
to
might-
make sure
You might not
that
have been there, yes, that's
that
right.
this 10,000 does not, for the Boys and Girls Club, where there's nothing in there for that.
That's correct.
Okay.
Just because Councilor Milks, I don't think you were here, one thing that we do provide for the Boys and Girls Club is the facility and any of the capital items for the facility.
And what was that? Did they tell you what that 20,000 was going to be for?
They had asked for, this was a lot of these are ARPA carryovers. They were funded in ARPA, we provided the funding, and so they've resubmitted and said, hey, you gave us 20,000 before, can we get 20,000 again? But it was that one-time allocation on.
It's not like when we had to fix the roof and whatnot, and we
Completely
allocated money
different.
to that.
We
It's
did
not
use
as-
some funding in ARPA, I think, for the flooring. I think
We
that
did the
might be-
floor, and we've done the roof in there,
Yeah.
but I just want to make sure that wasn't a specific need that they're asking for. It's, okay.
I think, it would come under their regular operating needs.
Okay, thank you.
And we would, if there are capital improvements or repairs required on the building pursuant to our agreement with the Boys and Girls Club, the city's responsible for that still.
Yeah, I voted in favor of the floor and the roof. Just wanted to make sure I understood what their ask was there. And you're saying in the swim team, we're not giving them any money, or we're gonna give them 5?
No, it's 0.
Okay.
I think Councilor Walker did think, I believe I'm remembering correctly, he, in his comments about the Boys and Girls Club, he thought that they had the potential to raise that through fundraising efforts, so.
They have a major capital fundraising effort going now.
And I think there's potential there for the swim team as well, to raise at least a partial of that 20,000. Because that was the full cost to cover the offset of the extra rental costs for the Bates and the YW pools. And at least when my daughter was on Twin City, I thought I understood that the 20,000 was that was the total difference that the YM was covering. It's not half of that difference.
That's the 20,000, that's correct. The 20,000 was for the pool rental, but it was for the whole program. And we asked for, we haven't received yet, but it's clearly that is not a program that's only serving residents of Auburn.
Absolutely. It's at least half in Lewiston, at least when my daughter was on it. And so it's much broader. So I think there's a broader potential for bringing in fundraising for that.
So your directive, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was gonna jump the gun and give you my answer to
Okay.
what our directive is. but
Perfect.
I was just gonna, I think you're looking for where we stand on what you've presented. I was just gonna say, I'm in support of the direction that this is headed in. Again, I think you've done some tough work to get to this point. I think the one piece that I'm missing, I'm curious when the appropriate time is to hear from the superintendent to understand if we're asking for a cut. What you've given great detail on all the city departments. I think the council probably would want to know the impact of the number that we'll
Absolutely, we wanna
propose.
know the
And I didn't know if
impact
that's
that-
today or if the next workshop.
Well, I guess we'd have to pose a question to the superintendent, if the superintendent and the school board work through that process. Yeah, great. So I think it'll be next Thursday at the workshop. We'll hear from the superintendent regarding what the school board identified as the cuts that would be made and what the impact of that is.
That'd be great. And then, yep, understood. For next workshop, I'll come with, if I believe there are any additional line item cuts, I'll be prepared with those for the next workshop.
Any additional information, or if you'd need us to be doing some of this homework related to the homeless funding and whether there's a shelter versus warming center, any input we could have for our next meeting or the next Thursday meeting in terms of what our expectations of Lewiston, if, I'm happy to reach out to some folks in terms of that, if that would be helpful. I'm just thinking the $400,000 they were asking from us, plus Lewiston, plus council, the county, was not going to cover the entire operational costs.
Correct.
So, I'm just wondering at this point if it's even feasible to have a shelter. So I don't know if there's things we can do to try to get some answers or some thoughts from that side in time for deliberation.
I think your counterparts in Lewiston have no clear direction at this point either. I think everything's kind of in the air. And so I think as soon as we have that, we'll bring it forward if that information, and I would guess that you will pass this budget without having any clear direction on what's happening.
Yeah,
That's my recommendation, is my thought.
I agree with that. I think the things that we know are that currently their proposal is around 40 beds. If you take the average shelter rack rate per night, that comes out to about $106 a night. It's about 1.6 million. Out of that 106, you're going to get a $7 a night offset just from the state's regular shelter money, And for the limited period of time, if they are eligible for GA, housing, I believe, Mr. Holmesy, I think it's $44 a night, which pays about half. To your question about the three sources fully funding the shelter, other than perhaps the municipal shelter in Portland, none of the other emergency shelters in the state are fully funded by the municipal governments in that area. All of them have a need to do fundraising from philanthropic sources, and I would assume that would be here. So we're not, I agree with the manager, we're not going, by the time our budget's done, we're not going to have I don't believe, a concrete plan about the implementation for the emergency shelter. But there'll either be an emergency shelter or a warming center next winter, right? One way or the other. And I think we should assume that if they implement a shelter, I think there's an expectation that the Lewiston Auburn participate in funding that, but they'll have to find the balance through grants, donations, like all the rest of the emergency shelters in the state.
That's certainly my understanding, and I was just kind of, I also was assuming that there has not been much success towards that fundraising effort. I didn't know if we had any more information on that. No. Thanks.
From a budget standpoint, how much did we allocate to the homeless services 3 years ago?
You did it in ARPA funding, but we can go back and get the total amount.
I'd be curious historically what that's been.
I believe last year was like 80-something thousand, but there was a year where you did more. That might have been the year before, so this would be the third year, but previous to that, you did allocate money out of
That's kind of the
ARPA.
number I remember from last year. I don't know, and I know there was ARPA money, but
Well, in this past year, the state grant, the total amount for the warming center, I think, was closer to 250,000?
239. So my
239.
recollection is that the first year of this council, we allocated $90,000 out of the fund balance, not out of ARPA. And then, if you recall, Lewiston acted after we did, and there was a different proposal, and Kelsey, I believe, we reduced that to 63.
62,500.
Yeah, so 63,000, and then as Councilor Cowan pointed out, we didn't need to allocate money this year because the state provided 239,000 to run the regional warming center this winter.
And the big difference there, and the reason for that big difference in cost was 2 years ago, we got started very late, and we were running a shelter from February to
10 weeks.
10 weeks, and this year it was starting in the fall and going through to April. So
For 5 months.
it was the full season.
Right. Yeah, that's correct. That's the difference. They ran it 10 weeks, where we split the cost with Lewiston the first year, and then this year it's operating for 5 months, and on the $239,000 from the one-time grant from the state.
Councilor Whiting, you did ask for positions. And so the breakdown of positions that we've had,
Manager, do you have a question before he moves on?
I did have one question. It was actually though about the budget at large. My memory from last year is that we had to, because of the percent increase of our budget, we had to approve it 5 votes. Am I misremembering what that function was?
yeah, it's when you approve the capital budget, then that requires a supermajority.
So that was just.
So
capital.
unless there is, no, I take that back. You do have 5 votes depending on the percentage of the increase. I'm sorry, you're correct.
So my question was, at current levels, would we, at 5.53% tax levy increase, would we need 5 or 4 votes?
So to clarify this, there was a local requirement and there was a state requirement. And the state requirement was tied to CPI, and if you exceeded that, the municipality needed a supermajority to pass the budget. That requirement that had been in place for a number of years was removed by the legislature last session.
LD1 is what it was
Right, in
referred to.
LD1, that's correct. And so, but we still, while we needed to have that language to comply with state statute, because it required you to record a vote on that compliance, that language was in the budget document last year. You won't see that this year, but it doesn't change the vote requirement because we still have the local ordinance requirement.
Do we know what that, oh, it's based on the CPI. It's not a flat percentage. It's based on this.
It's based on votes to pass the budget.
You're exceeding it in this budget.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The local requirement isn't a CPI tied, it's just tied to passage of the budget.
So are we gonna have to have a 5 or a 4 vote?
You'll have to have 5.
Thank you.
Yeah. Sorry, I was thinking of LD1 when I had answered that. That was eliminated, but our ordinance still requires it. Council Whiting, you had asked about positions. So there were 3 positions that we identified that had been vacant. One was the communications assistant that I proposed that we eliminate. And then the other position was the maintenance electrical work for the electrician, not the code enforcement electrician, but the electrical position. That position, we recommended in the manager's budget, actually outsource that. So those 2 positions won't be continued to be vacant. We haven't advertised for those ones since we made that decision. And then the third position was one of the mechanic positions for the public works. That has remained vacant for a great amount of time. We're hiring other mechanics, but we're still not getting to that full capacity. And I guess in a way you could say that's the same as what we're doing right now with police and fire as well. Those are always revolving, but at least that one mechanic has consistently stayed vacant. So we haven't seen the true impact. So they're outsourcing, they're doing whatever they need to do for that vacancy, but those are the 3. Yeah.
And 2 of those were eliminated in the manager's.
2 of those are eliminated in the manager's budget. Yeah.
Other questions or thoughts councilors have on the budget proposal?
When you start formulating some of these, and I know it's a quick turnaround because we're talking about Tuesday, but if on Monday you could email me what you have, then I can make sure I let the people behind me know, hey, this is some further information we're going to need based on some feedback that I'm getting from you, and then they can be prepared when they come in. So we're not saying, well, let us go back and get that, and we'll get back to you. We'll hopefully be able to have it all that night, and we'll be able to keep moving. Okay?
And remind us what the date is that by which the school budget, because there's a couple things in motion here, right? Ultimately, you have until January 30th on the municipal budget, and then it kicks over to the manager's proposal.
June
But
30th.
June 30th, sorry, yeah. But on the school budget, there's timing that has to work back from the June referendum and leave time for the clerk to prepare the ballots and those types of things. So do we have a date by which the school budget needs to be approved?
So your first meeting in May, you'll need to adopt the school budget.
That
Right,
gives,
and
yeah,
so-
that gives 45 days ahead of the election for absentee ballots.
Right, so just to set expectations, theoretically, if we hadn't wrapped up the municipal budget by that point, we could still approve the school budget.
correct.
That would flow through to
Yep.
the referendum date, okay. Just so everyone's sort of understanding the timetable we're working on here.
Yeah, so by
So
that
that would
May
be
meeting, you need to make sure you've locked in the school budget on what that's going to be. We can get everything prepared, and then you can still go through, as the mayor said, continue negotiating the municipal. Okay?
Other thoughts or questions? No, Mr. Manager, you have anything further?
Stay tuned, we'll see you Tuesday night.
The work session will be adjourned. Thank you very much, everyone.